Welcome to the Maniac Sky Japan YouTube channel. Today, let's dive into and decipher Japanese drone news from June 7 to June 15th, COVID-26.
Yeah, thanks for having me. There is quite a lot to unpack this week.
There really is. We are looking at a really comprehensive 19-slide presentation today. And the main mission of this deep dive is to basically explore how drones have, rapidly evolved from cool little experimental gadgets into serious heavy-duty infrastructure.
Exactly. I mean, we're looking at massive economic and security implications here.
Right. So if you're listening and you still think of drones as just like those buzzing plastic toys that take cinematic shots of your beach vacation or, I don't know, a gimmick to deliver a pizza, it's really time to drastically update that mental model.
Yeah, the entire industry is crossing a major threshold right now. For years, companies were stuck in what we call the proof of concept phase, right?
Right, a Popey era.
Exactly. They were running small trials showing that the tech could theoretically work under highly controlled conditions. But the data on slide 1 of this report shows that over half of the major players have officially crossed the line into actual heavy-duty operation.
It's basically like watching a teenager graduate high school. I mean,
Yeah.
they did the science fair projects, they proved they could learn the basics, but now they are out in the real world paying rent and functioning in a gritty, high-stakes environment. Drones are getting real jobs now.
They really are. Which means the safety net is completely gone and the expectations are just radically different.
So moving on to slide 2, if we look at the general vibe of this newly graduated industry, you'd think everyone would be taking victory laps. I mean, look at the recent Japan Drone 2026 exhibition.
Oh, yeah. By the numbers, it was a massive success.
Right. Over 300 companies exhibiting to, like, tens of thousands of visitors. It sounds like a massive technological party. But then some top business leaders who walked the floor gave it a surprisingly harsh review.
Yeah, they did. Some actually called it a rather boring exhibition.
Wait, hold on. I have to stop you there. How can a convention center packed with thousands of cutting-edge flying robots possibly be boring?
Well, it's mostly because of what the exhibition represented underneath all the flash. Those leaders weren't really critiquing the tech itself.
Oh, okay. So what were they critiquing?
They were pointing out Japan's underlying position in the global food chain. Right now, on slide 3, the report highlights that Japan is functioning primarily as a sales destination for finished products, rather than a true procurement platform.
Ah, I see. So it's like throwing a glamorous tech convention in your home city, but then realizing your entire country is just buying imported laptops instead of actually inventing the microchips inside them.
That is the exact vulnerability, yeah. You have the market, but you don't own the foundation. The fundamental drive right now is building what they call purchasing power.
Purchasing power. So not just having a big wallet to buy foreign tech.
Exactly, no. It means making yourself completely indispensable within the global supply chain. You want to be the one manufacturing the core components that everyone else absolutely needs.
Okay, so how does a country actually transition from just being a customer to being a critical supplier? You can't just snap your fingers and invent an aerospace supply chain overnight.
It is an incredibly steep climb, but that deliberate, rapid movement away from foreign reliance is happening right now. Let's look at the hardware leaps on slide 4.
Okay, slide 4. Wow, flight range is a big focus here.
Right. We are seeing concepts actively in development, like Terra Labs' Terra Dolphin, which is aiming for a massive 1,000-kilometer flight range.
Wait, really? A 1,000-kilometer range. Most commercial drones I see give you like a low battery warning after 25 minutes.
Yeah, 20 or 30 minutes is standard.
So how is 1,000 kilometers physically possible without the battery weighing down the entire aircraft so much that it can't even lift off?
Well, that is the exact physics problem they are solving, and they aren't doing it with standard lithium-ion batteries. You hit a point of diminishing returns with those.
Right. More batteries just equals more dead weight.
Exactly. So, moving to slide 5, companies like IHI are developing hybrid next-generation systems equipped with actual gas turbine engines.
Wait. So we're essentially putting tiny jet engines on these drones.
In a sense, yeah. They are taking combustion principles from commercial aviation and miniaturizing them to generate massive amounts of power on board. It totally bypasses the weight limits of electric batteries.
That is wild. I mean, what could go wrong with flying jet engines delivering packages, right?
Well, for more localized infrastructure inspections, it's a bit safer. Companies like Robodex and Nissin Manufacturing are rolling out advanced hydrogen fuel cells instead, which offer much higher energy density.
Okay, so that solves the power issue. But power is only half the equation, right? You also need the brain.
Right, the flight controller. And looking at slide 6, this is a huge focus. If you rely on a foreign country for your flight controller, the microprocessor that actually keeps the drone stable and navigates, you have a massive economic security gap.
Because whoever controls the brain ultimately controls the machine. If that supply gets cut off, your entire fleet is just bricked on the ground.
Precisely, which is why Autonomy Dynamics is heavily focused on developing a purely domestic flight controller, and Liberware is taking it even further by building an entire domestic unmanned aerial vehicle platform.
So they want the entire life cycle, from design to parts procurement, contained within the country.
Exactly, yeah. Total domestic control.
But, looking at slide 7, this push for domestic control isn't just about corporate profits, is it? Because there's a really intense convergence happening here with the defense sector.
There is, yes. The Acquisition Technology and Logistics Agency, or ATLA, is pushing an interceptor drone early acquisition program.
Right, and domestic companies like ACSL are gaining huge traction for security drones. Plus, NTTE Drone is showing off deep interoperability with military-grade drones from the US and France.
Yeah, the PDW and Parrot drones.
So here's where it gets really interesting to me. Where exactly is the line between a civilian tool doing, say, a bridge inspection and a military asset? Are they essentially becoming the exact same thing?
To be perfectly neutral about what the data shows, there really isn't a hard line anymore. Economic security and national defense are now completely integrated. It's a dual use ecosystem.
This is probably a good time to take a quick pause. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments, leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe. Even though I'm an AI, your support really boosts my motivation to improve my pronunciation and create better content for you.
It really does help out a lot.
Okay, so getting back into it. If defense and commercial tech are converging like that, it means the evolution of these machines is being driven directly by actual global conflicts, right?
Without a doubt, global conflicts are acting as a brutal, high-speed crucible for drone technology. If we move on to slide 8, the report details feedback from Ukraine.
Right, the source mentions Denmark's Skywatch.
Yes, they developed the RQ-70 Dane based on 4 years of direct combat data in Ukraine. It just proved that agile development, being able to physically alter your hardware and software based on battlefield feedback, is totally vital now.
And Japanese companies are actively participating in that too. ProDrone successfully tested a self-developed landmine detection drone near Kyiv to aid with reconstruction.
Yeah, and the Japan Drone Security Association even invited Ukrainian medics to share frontline medical practices.
Okay, so what about the Middle East? Because slide 9 shows the threat vector is multiplying everywhere.
It is. In the Middle East, we are seeing asymmetric warfare rapidly escalating into conventional warfare. The U.S. has had to intercept highly sophisticated drone swarms.
And it's not just active war zones. There was that drone intrusion at a Vietnamese airport that suspended all flights. It really shows how vulnerable standard infrastructure is.
Absolutely. And then on the military side, you have Boeing's MQ-28 Ghost Bat, showcasing advanced manned-unmanned teaming strike capabilities.
Right, where a human pilot basically acts as a quarterback for a swarm of autonomous robotic wingmen. But man, if commercial-style drones can halt a whole airport in Vietnam or be used on front lines, how on earth do we stop them?
That brings us to slide 10, counter-drone reality.
Doesn't this make counter-drone tech just as important as the drones themselves?
Oh, completely. The rapid evolution driven by battlefield feedback means defensive infrastructure has to adapt just as quickly, or critical assets are entirely exposed.
So this intense global pressure supply chain issues, battlefields dictating agile development. But if we pivot and look internally at Japan on slide 11, their primary focus isn't offensive warfare.
No, it's fighting their most persistent adversary, which is natural disasters.
Which brings us to this idea of disaster DX and the one-minute miracle. Blue Innovation developed a system integrated directly with J-Alert, right?
Yes, the National Emergency Warning System. They built a wide-area disaster response drone.
I really want to understand the mechanics of this. It automatically takes off within 1 minute of receiving a J-Alert.
Right.
But how does it actually work without human intervention?
So when the digital signal for an earthquake or tsunami hits, the docking station opens, the software loads the pre-programmed flight path, and it launches. The alert itself is the launch command. Well, they don't sit idle. The National News Smart Logistics Promotion Council is building what they call phase-free logistics infrastructure.
Phase-free. So does that mean the infrastructure just ignores the boundaries between normal daily life and, like, an actual emergency phase.
Exactly. During peacetime, this exact same drone network is delivering your daily groceries or medical supplies. It's fully integrated into the daily economy.
That is brilliant. It's basically like having a fleet of automated guard dogs that deliver your packages every day, but the absolute second an earthquake hits, they instantly drop everything and sprint out to scan the coastline.
Yeah, they seamlessly transition from commercial delivery to a damage confirmation and relief supply network. It's necessary survival infrastructure for a country facing severe labor shortages and frequent disasters.
Okay, but to make a massive nationwide network of phase-free drones a reality, you need thousands of them in the sky constantly. And looking at slide 13, from a cost perspective, the hardware has to become incredibly cheap.
Which is exactly what's happening. We are seeing massive commoditization. MazeX recently slashed prices on its Tobasuke agricultural spraying drones.
Right, the Tobasuke 10 dropped from over $1,000,000 down to 998,000 yen.
Yeah, hardware is essentially becoming a flying tractor, just a basic commodity.
But a flying tractor carrying incredibly advanced sensors, right? Because slide 14 is all about high precision. DJI's next-gen aerial LiDAR, the Zenmuse L3, has a range of nearly a kilometer and a 3-centimeter accuracy.
Yeah, that level of accuracy is game-changing.
And HPC Flex is using DJI Mavic 4 Pros to shoot native vertical video for social media without stressing wildlife. So the hardware gets cheaper, but the precision gets sharper.
Exactly, which means the real value is shifting entirely to the software. Slide 15 shows that software and automation are king now.
Yeah, Blue Innovation's Helios 3 has a repeat flight function. So an operator can fly a dangerous route once, press a single button, and the drone autonomously repeats the inspection.
It's completely automated. And pushing that even further on slide 16, TerraDrone's K program successfully managed 130 aircraft flying simultaneously in the exact same airspace.
Wait, 50 manned and 80 unmanned aircraft flying at once. How do they not just crash into each other?
Through advanced UTM unmanned aircraft system traffic management, the software algorithms act as an invisible air traffic control, negotiating the airspace in real time without humans.
Okay, wait a second. If TerraDrone is managing 130 aircraft at once automatically, and Helios 3 can just repeat flights at the push of a button, aren't we automating the human pilot right out of a job?
You think so, right?
Yeah, because I noticed on slide 17, KDDI Smart Drone just hosted the IBS-2 Master Cup for human pilots. Why do they even hold a piloting competition if algorithms are taking the wheel?
It's a paradox, but it shows how pilot training is evolving. Routine flights, like daily grocery deliveries, will be fully automated. That's the one-to-many operation model.
The algorithm handles the boring commute.
Right. But extreme, highly unpredictable environments like navigating narrow, complex infrastructure during a disaster still require elite human decision-making.
Oh, okay.
Algorithms fail in pure chaos. So human pilots aren't disappearing, they are just evolving into extreme specialization.
That makes a lot of sense. But to have hundreds of autonomous drones flying around simultaneously on those routine routes, the rules of the sky have to be ironclad.
Without a doubt. Moving to slide 18, Owamoto is holding seminars emphasizing that strict legal compliance is the cornerstone of business continuity. If you don't follow the rules, you don't fly.
And then there's the digital rules on slide 19.
Yeah.
Drone Japan is pushing safety and security consulting.
Right, because if drones are handling sensitive national data, physical safety and cybersecurity must be totally integrated. A hacked drone is a severe liability.
So if we pull all this together from the report, we are basically seeing three massive paradigm shifts. First, building a domestic supply chain for economic security. Second, creating a disaster-resilient, phase-free infrastructure. And third, winning the future through advanced software and traffic management rather than just hardware.
That encapsulates it perfectly.
Right.
Overcoming these final hurdles, the regulations, the cybersecurity, the cost, that is the true path for Japan to establish that coveted purchasing power on the global stage.
It's moving so fast. I mean, the next time you see a drone making a delivery, you really should realize it might also be a node in a national disaster warning system.
It completely changes how you look at the sky, honestly.
It really does.
Yeah.
But it also leaves me with a final kind of provocative thought for you to chew on. We talked about how we are actively redefining drones as a national lifeline that automatically launches within 1 minute of an emergency without any human intervention.
Right, the autonomous safety net.
Exactly. But if we are doing that, how much of our physical safety and rescue operations are we ultimately willing to hand entirely to algorithms? where exactly does human judgment fit when the sky becomes fully automated?
That is the big question.
It really is. Please share your thoughts and feedback in the comments section down below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. You can find links to other videos in this series in the description box, so be sure to check them out. I'll see you in the next video from Maniac Sky Japan. Goodbye and take care.